At 10:45 local time in October 2025, the Central Caribbean looked almost unreal. The sun bounced off a calm metallic sea, turning every wave into a flash of silver. Aboard the USS Mason, the air carried the low buzz of radio static and the faint scent of aviation fuel. Then a contact appeared on the Aegis radar. It moved slowly, steadily, almost too calmly. Track Sierra 2-1. Range 21,000 yards. Speed 6 knots. Closest point of approach negative. On the main display, the track curved lazily through open water. At first glance, it resembled a small cargo vessel, roughly 110 meters long. But there was no AIS signal. No transponder, no flag, no clear identity. Just a silent shape pushing north through the Caribbean. Inside the Combat Information Center, the room settled into that sharp kind of silence that only happens when everyone senses something is wrong before anyone says it out loud. Visual confirms hull markings are obscured, the officer of the deck reported. Sunlight is catching the deck. Looks like containers, but they're too uniform. High above, a P-8 Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft banked at 22,000 feet and turned its MX-20 sensor toward the vessel. The thermal feed came through with remarkable clarity. Beneath the upper deck, the aircraft detected neat rows of warm signatures stacked tightly in repeating patterns. Not grain, not fuel, something else. Something processed, sealed, and carefully hidden. The chatter inside CIC grew sharper. Analysts flagged the vessel as a possible carrier for restricted chemical materials and offshore financial storage. Then a name moved across the encrypted net. Chandai Ara, a South American criminal network known for using innocent people as cover for high-value shipments. Cross-checks began lining up fast. 300 tons of controlled precursors, 13,000 containers believed to hold currency, and possibly 40 civilians being kept below deck. A billion-dollar floating stronghold was drifting through blue water. At 1100, the USS Mason made the first hail. Loudspeakers carried the message across the open sea. Unidentified vessel, this is a United States Navy warship conducting a lawful inspection under International Maritime Safety Authority. Identify yourself immediately. No answer. A second hail followed in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Still nothing. Only the slow churn of diesel engines under the bright midday sun. The rules of engagement protocol opened. Warn, show presence, escalate with minimum force. On deck, an MH-60R Seahawk waited with its rotors turning in slow, steady circles. Crew members stood ready with long-range optics and recording equipment, documenting every movement. The Mason's forward system remained inactive, visible, but silent, a clear sign of restraint. In the Combat Information Center, the commanding officer watched the display with folded arms. No response, no identification. Wrong emissions, he said. Log it as an uncooperative vessel. Maintain intercept geometry. Keep eyes on. Outside, sunlight shimmered across the freighter's steel hull. From a distance, it looked harmless. Almost too harmless. At 11:12, the Poseidon picked up another detail. Short bursts of encrypted satellite traffic from the aft section. The pattern suggested a hidden communications setup routed through a spoofed fishing beacon. SLQ-32 confirms irregular emissions, sir, the electronic support chief said. That is not standard civilian behavior. Below deck on the Mason, the SEAL teams waited quietly in their RHIBs. The plan was precise. Blind the top deck first, board second, secure the civilians last. Every step depended on timing. From the bridge, binoculars caught movement on the cargo deck. Two figures stepped into view, scanning the horizon. One carried a radio handset. The other appeared to notice the distant outline of the destroyer and quickly moved back inside. The commanding officer exhaled. That confirms it. They know we're here. He keyed the microphone. All stations, phase gold scheduled for 11:30. Drones will disable topside systems. Boarding follows on my mark. Minimum force. Civilian safe zones remain priority. The sunlight grew harsher. It was the kind of glare that erased shadows and made tension feel heavier. The horizon shimmered like heat rising from asphalt. Every sensor, every camera, every person on watch waited for the next command. At 11:29, the minute hand reached vertical. The freighter still had not answered. The sea was blinding. The air felt frozen in place. The captain gave a single nod. Phase line gold. Execute. At 11:30, the Caribbean sky burned white. No clouds, no wind, just sunlight reflecting from metal and water. From 20 nautical miles away, 50 low-profile drones launched from a Navy support vessel, spreading across the horizon like a swarm of silver sparks. They skimmed just above the waterline, barely 10 feet up, their propellers cutting through the air in perfect rhythm. Each carried a small precision charge designed to disable systems, not sink the ship. Inside the Mason's Combat Information Center, the drone operator tracked the swarm on a blue-lit screen. Targets locked, bridge optics, radar pedestals, and topside mounts. Coordinates verified. Execute, came the reply. Seconds later, the freighter's upper structure erupted in sharp flashes. The impacts were clean and controlled, tearing away sensors, cameras, and exposed hardpoints without touching the lower compartments. A forward heavy mount folded backward and went silent. The radar mast vanished behind a bloom of orange-gray smoke. Live camera feeds from the Mason showed fragments of metal dropping into the water as deck sentries stumbled across the vessel, suddenly cut off from sight lines and communications. At 11:33, 3 sealed Brabs broke formation and surged forward. Their twin outboards carved long white wakes across the flat Caribbean surface as they closed in under the midday sun. Blue 1, 200 meters and closing. Lights cold. Red 2, anchor point locked. Climb on my go. The teams moved with exact, practiced rhythm. Black wetsuits, mirrored goggles, equipment held tight against their chests. Sunlight flashed across their gear in quick silver sparks as the RHIBs cut through the glare. Hooks launched. Steel caught steel. Lines snapped tight. Seconds later, the first operator was already climbing the freighter's side, moving almost silently against the hull. He swung over the rail, then another followed, then 6 more. Above them, drones circled in tight patterns, scanning the deck for fresh movement and heat signatures. A few armed guards still tried to respond, sending wild bursts toward the water, blinded by sunlight and confusion. Every flash exposed their position. The SEALs answered with short, controlled movements, fast enough to shut down each threat before it could spread. At 11:36, the first breach came midship. A precision charge pushed the door inward, and gray smoke rolled into the narrow corridor beyond. "Flash out!" the point man called. A stun device followed, filling the passage with a hard white burst of light and pressure. 2 hostile figures lost balance and hit the deck before they could react. "Clear left, clear right, move!" The team advanced in a smooth, disciplined flow, clearing one compartment after another. Inside, the air was heavy with heat, sweat, and sharp industrial fumes. In a forward cabin, 2 armed men crouched behind stacked barrels, using frightened civilians as cover. The operator at the doorway made a tiny adjustment through his optic. 1 breath, 1 clean decision. Both threats were stopped before the civilians could be harmed. The people inside froze, blinking in shock, barely able to process that the room had gone quiet. "Room secure. Civilians accounted for," came the radio call. At 11:42, the fight shifted to the engine room. Noise swallowed everything. Turbines screamed, pipes rattled, red alarms blinked through waves of steam. 3 hostile crew members fired blindly from behind the machinery, forcing the SEALs into cover. "Contact left, suppress." The exchange was brief and intense, 15 seconds at most. Then the steam thinned and the resistance was over. One operator took a minor scrape to the arm, treated on the spot before the team pushed forward. Engine control secured, power stable. By 11:48, the bridge had collapsed into confusion. Paper charts scattered across the floor. Warning tones echoed from every console. The syndicate commander stood near the center, a tall man gripping a radio that no longer reached anyone, shouting into silence. The door slammed open. "United States Navy, down on the deck." He turned, hesitated for 1 second too long, and was taken down hard. His radio skidded across the floor. Moments later, he was restrained, disarmed, and staring up at the operators with wide, stunned eyes. "Bridge secure," the transmission reported. "Command section neutralized." Every step was documented. Laptops were sealed, ledgers were collected, manifests were photographed, tagged, and uploaded to onboard servers for chain of custody. This was not chaos. It was procedure under pressure. Precision over panic. Discipline over adrenaline. At 11:55, the ship finally went quiet. Only the steady buzz of drones remained overhead, circling like watchful sentinels. In hold number 2, a locked door gave way under a controlled breach. Behind it were 42 civilians, restrained, exhausted, dehydrated, terrified, but alive. Medics moved fast. Restraints were cut. Water was passed hand to hand. Each survivor received a wristband and a quick assessment. Sunlight poured through an overhead hatch, falling across pale faces as they blinked up at freedom for the first time in days. Across the comm radio net, the commanding officer's voice came through steady and clear. Bridge secure. Civilians located. Begin extraction. Maintain defensive posture. The sea glittered so brightly it was almost impossible to look at. Thin pockets of smoke curled from the freighter's upper decks, but the operation was effectively over. The USS Mason's pale hull eased closer through the calm water, while helicopters hovered above like watchful guardians. By 1200 hours, control of the vessel had fully changed hands. The criminal ship was silent, the civilians were safe, and under the full glare of the Caribbean sun, a billion-dollar operation had come apart in open water. At 12:20, October 2025, Central Caribbean. Sunlight poured across the steel decks, exposing what had been hidden below. Smoke drifted from the stern in narrow ribbons, twisting upward into the clear blue sky. The air carried the smell of salt, fuel, and scorched paint. The high-risk phase was finished, but the real work had only just begun. On board, the SEAL teams moved through the vessel with calm precision. Their weapons stayed lowered as cameras, evidence bags, and body cams took priority. Every barrel, every crate of currency, every piece of equipment, and every detained crew member was logged and photographed under the noonday sun. The mission had shifted from action to evidence. In the central hold, Navy technicians opened sealed containers one by one. Inside were rows of gray drums marked with fake fertilizer labels. Each drum was tested, tagged, and confirmed as part of a massive controlled chemical shipment. The total count, 300 metric tons. Beside them stood towering stacks of sealed currency crates, packed with US dollars, euros, and Venezuelan bolivars. Investigators estimated the value at nearly $12 billion. A Navy officer spoke into his body cam. Target objective achieved. Cargo verified. No civilians harmed. Overhead, the Mason's Seahawk hovered low, lowering rescue baskets to the deck. 42 civilians, exhausted but alive, were lifted one by one into the sunlight. Some cried quietly, others stared ahead in silence, the rotowash whipping across their faces as the helicopter carried them towards safety. At 13:35, a Coast Guard law enforcement team arrived aboard a cutter to take custody of the vessel. The freighter's deck became a scene of organized urgency. Medics checked the survivors. Legal officers documented the evidence. SEAL operators sat in the shade, drinking warm electrolyte packs, quiet and reflective after the mission. The syndicate commander, restrained and blindfolded, knelt at the base of the bridge stairwell. He said nothing. His ship, his money, his cargo, and his reputation had all been taken in broad daylight. Not in secrecy, not under cover of darkness, but in full view of the Caribbean sun. Drone footage captured everything: the precision disabling actions, the boarding, the rescue, and the evidence recovery. Within hours, those feeds would move through command briefings and later reach public channels. Transparency was part of the message. In Washington, D.C., at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood beneath the bright lights of the press room and addressed the cameras. This was not an act of aggression. It was an act of defense against criminal networks that endanger our communities and exploit innocent people for profit. Those who attempt to move illegal shipments toward the United States should expect accountability, not negotiation. The message traveled far beyond Washington. Across Latin America, news outlets replayed the footage. Some governments praised the operation, others criticized it. But for the Chendai network, the result was impossible to spin. It was not just a setback, it was a public collapse. Operation Deep Current showed that the modern maritime battlefield is not defined only by ships and firepower. It is shaped by data, timing, restraint, and legal authority. The success came from synchronized systems, P-8 surveillance, thermal mapping, drone precision, and a seamless Navy to Coast Guard handoff. Strategists pointed to the operation's discipline. No civilians were harmed. No unnecessary force was used. Every action was documented, justified, and preserved for legal review. It became a new model for daylight interdiction, where legitimacy itself becomes a form of deterrence. But analysts also warned that one success does not erase an entire network. Smuggling routes adapt, supply chains shift, new alliances form. The next phase, they said, must focus on the financial system behind the operation. The accountants, brokers, shell companies, and corrupt officials who keep the machine alive. As one admiral later summarized in the post-action review, you can stop a ship in 30 minutes, but taking apart a system requires strategy. That, officials said, is the next fight. Not one led by helicopters and boarding teams, but by investigators, analysts, financial tracking, and international cooperation. At 1600 hours, the freighter, now under Coast Guard tow, moved slowly toward Guantanamo Bay. Its hull was blackened in places. Its flag hung torn. Its nameplate was sealed beneath evidence tape. The Mason steamed beside it, sailors leaning along the rails as the afternoon sun softened across the water. The sea sparkled beneath them, calm again, as if nothing had happened. Then a quiet voice broke the silence on deck. 42 people got a second chance today. That's what matters. The camera lifted toward the open sky. 2 ships moved across the Caribbean, leaving long white trails behind them. In the end, sunlight became the spotlight, precision became the shield, and justice moved across the sea on gray steel hulls. But one operation does not end a global fight. It only proves the resolve to continue it. Do you believe missions like this should focus more on maritime interdictions or on cutting off the financial networks that fund them? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more real-world naval operations explained with accuracy, discipline, and respect for those who serve.